Well, let's take a closer look at the ongoing search for the COVID-19 vaccine. Former U.S. Food and Drug Administration Associate Commissioner Peter Pitts joins us live tonight from New York. Thank you so much for joining us from New York. Good morning to you, Professor Pitts. First of all, in your view, is this vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech a milestone?
This is really quite spectacular. Any vaccine for any disease that has a 90% effective rate is outstanding. And a 90% effectiveness rate for COVID-19 is a game changer. What we're going to see now are people excited to get vaccinated. That's very important. But most importantly, it works, and it works extremely well. We really are turning a corner. We're not there yet, but this is big news. It's exciting news, and it should be news for optimism, not just in the US, but around the world.
As you say, it is about to cross the finish line. What still needs to be done for it to get FDA emergency approval?
Well, the FDA still has to review the data robustly and in detail, but they've got the capacity to do that. It's an all-hands-on-deck proposition now at the FDA. I think what we'll see, if all things continue to go forward and the data turns out to be good as it accumulates, is at-risk groups, most important groups, for example, medical workers and essential workers being vaccinated, possibly even by the end of this year. And then in the first quarter of 2021, moving on to the at-risk population and everybody else. So I think that by Easter of 2021, we should be well on our way on a massive global vaccination program with the Pfizer vaccine as the first out of the gate.
But could it get an emergency approval by the end of the month, as they are hoping?
I've heard that. I'm going to be pragmatic. I'm going to say by the end of the year, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's sooner. But we are almost really at the end of the year. So let's say that by the end of November, we have an emergency use authorization. Pfizer already has been manufacturing at risk, so there are tens of millions of doses ready for distribution. Now it's a question of the logistics of getting it done. It's very difficult. The U.S. military is in charge of logistics here in the U.S., and they're the best at it anywhere in the world. So I'm confident that the vaccine is going to get an emergency use authorization, and we will have the capacity to get it to the people that need it the most quickly.
Well, apart from Pfizer, BioNTech, Professor, there are more than 10 other vaccines in the final stages of testing, from Oxford, AstraZeneca, you have Moderna, Novavax, Russia's Gamaleya Institute, China's Sinopharm, and Sinovac, all of them using different methods in attacking the virus.
Very good news. And it's a very robust pipeline. We're going to need more than one vaccine. And the most important thing here is that they're not all identical. They all approach the virus, as you mentioned, in different ways. And what's going to be even most important is that some of these vaccines, the Moderna vaccine, for example, is collecting data to show that it is effective for an elderly population. Other vaccines might show that they're more effective or safer for a pediatric population. We're going to learn by doing, and the technology will only get better over time.
From your standpoint, which of these 10 or more vaccines currently in phase 3 trials have the same kind of efficacy as the Pfizer-BioNTech?
Well, we don't know yet, but I think that if Pfizer has hit the 90% mark when the threshold was between 60% and 50%, so it's a huge victory, I suspect that other vaccines, not all of them, but more than a few, will have equal or perhaps even greater efficacy rates. But I'll settle for 90% across the board, and I think that's really where we're heading.
But of course, there are a couple of these vaccines from pharmaceutical companies that are stumbling or facing some challenges before they get to the finish line. For example, AstraZeneca and Oxford, and you also have Sinovac.
Yes. As you mentioned, some of these vaccine trials are showing adverse events. That's why you do the trials. That's why you do them on a large scale. You have to understand why they happen, what they mean, and if they are product killers. I suspect that a lot of these programs will understand why these adverse events happened. It will not stop the program. They'll continue. But as you mentioned, it certainly does slow down the development. It will slow down and make the FDA have to do a far more diligent job, which it is prepared to do. The only thing worse than no vaccine is a bad vaccine. We've got to avoid that at all costs. I don't think anybody wants to rush the process to a point where we're bringing bad products onto the market. That's why the system is designed the way that it is, to make sure that we understand exactly what these products do before they are released to the general population.
And briefly, the FDA has given emergency authorization to Eli Lilly's experimental antibody therapy for COVID-19. It's similar to the Regeneron treatment President Trump received.
This is a very exciting emergency use authorization because, unlike previous EUAs, this is for a product that's designated for use for people that are not on oxygen or are not hospitalized, who are ambulatory, who can walk into the hospital and get treated. So we're really understanding, short of a vaccine, how to treat people who are ill, keep them alive, get them through the virus, and get them back to their day-to-day life. So even though infection rates in some places are spiking, certainly in the US that's true, our death rates remain very low. And that's a huge victory because at the beginning of the pandemic, as infection rates spiked, so did deaths. So we've turned a corner on keeping people alive, and now a vaccine is going to make it even easier for us to kill this virus in its tracks.
A lot of good news from the vaccine pipeline. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Peter Pitts, former US FDA Associate Commissioner, joining us live from New York.